Hello, History 20 students. Welcome to what I think is the final live session of the quarter. And I just wanted to thank you for your hard work. I've been blessed to work with some very hardworking and insightful students in this class, and it's always appreciated as a teacher and a man who's getting older and older. It's always nice to see that the future's in good hands and that there's a lot of bright and introspective people out there who are going to be leading our world into the future. So, good on you, and I really wish you nothing but the best of luck finishing this class up, as well as finishing your other classes for the quarter, whatever you've got lined up. And again, I wish you the best for a good start to the next quarter as well. So as usual, I'm going to try and use this session kind of half and half, a little bit for housekeeping and end of the quarter type stuff, and then going through a little bit of the material on our final unit here, Unit 4, and this is more where we know where we've come from now, at least to a large extent, but maybe in a bit more detail than you previously knew, and how are we going to take that forward? What was the most important? What were your most important takeaways from the history that we've discussed and dived into this quarter, and how are we going to take that forward and learn from it, with our ultimate goal being to be lifelong learners, to be good citizens, for people to be happy, healthy, connected, and to feel valued in society and feel that we are contributing, that we are parts that contribute to a whole that is important and meaningful. And that's just the way that I phrased it, but I think we've all got some idea as to what a healthy society would or should look like, and hopefully we're using what we've learned in the past to get a little bit closer to that every generation. So some housekeeping items first. Our administrators asked us to mention one more time that HIS20 is now live for students. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. If you haven't heard it, and you probably have in other classes, HIS20 is what we're going to be using from now on in order to handle all student data and information. We formerly used Maplewood, and I'm pretty sure that most of you know what Maplewood is, but the reality is probably very few of you consistently logged into Maplewood to look at your schedule or your marks or anything like that. I think most students looked at it kind of a couple times a semester, and then when they were forced to during registration period, you'd open it up with your teachers, and then you'd pick the classes you want for the next year and things like that. I don't think the majority of students used Maplewood a whole lot, whereas teachers used it a lot, because it's where we kept all student information and parent and guardian information and all your marks and your transcripts and comments and report cards and things like that. So it's kind of it's a big deal for both teachers and for students, but this is something that's definitely going to affect you a lot moving forward in school, and so you need to kind of jump on this train early just to make sure that you're familiar with it. So I'll just mention a few things and give you a brief overview, and if you have heard this before, I apologize. But HIS20 is going to be the new web-based online place where basically you're connected with your school and with the people at the school, and we're connected with you. So it's going to be the place where you can see your calendar. It's going to be the place where, at least for in-person students, it's going to be the place where you see assignments and due dates, and possibly assignments you need to download and complete, and sometimes this will be where you hand in assignments. We're getting a bit further and further away every year from the old teacher hands out paper, you fill in paper, you hand paper in. A lot more of what we're doing now is more in the digital realm. So it makes sense to have a good, strong, secure digital, I'll call it meeting spot, where we can accomplish a lot of things in one place. And it's supposed to be sort of like one-stop shopping for teachers and students. So the sorts of things that you're going to see on HIS20 are going to be your attendance, your grades for each class, your personal information, addresses and phone numbers, and your teachers, teacher contact information about the building, announcements from school, your report cards and your report card comments, things like that. So, things that we've done the same way for a long time, some of those are going to be going away. I think we will, relatively quickly get to the point where you're not getting, paper copy report cards anymore, because you can check your mark in any given class at any time, 24/7. You're a bit more used to that than other groups of students because you're online students and you can do that anyway. That you can log into Blackboard at 3:30 in the morning and go to the My Grades area and see what your mark is at any point, or know which assignments are due and overdue and which ones you've handed in and what your mark is on the ones you handed in and the feedback you've gotten. So, I mean, as online students, you're more conversant already with the way that we communicate digitally, but this is going to be something that every student is expected to use, and you're going to see it every day. Likely every day at school for for your future as your career as a student and possibly educator. So that's the sort of stuff you're going to be able to see. The other major very important part is that parents and guardians are going to be able to see the same information. So whatever you can see inside EDSB, your parents and guardians can see inside EDSB as well. And some students are probably going to say, yeah, that makes sense. That's good. That's going to be efficient. And other people are probably going, oh no, my parents can see everything. And you know what? I do understand that. I was a teenager once too. Now I'm a parent, so hopefully I can kind of see both sides of it. So I know some students are not going to be particularly jazzed about that. But it's also a reality that if you're not an adult, your parents are legally allowed to have access to that information, and just like they're legally responsible for your health and well-being, that's part of it, right? Having access to your educational history and progress is part of their rights as a parent, and I'm a parent. My rights as a parent. So you need to be aware that your parents are going to have access to anything that teachers put up. Whether it be there's an assignment and a new due date, or there's an exam coming up, or here's the mark you got on your last exam. They're going to be able to see some of that. I shouldn't say they're going to be able to see everything, because there are certain things that teachers and administrators and whatnot can kind of lock, so it's not publicly available. When I say publicly available, I mean just you and your parents or guardians. Okay, any of the information that's on your website is your personal information, which means as teachers and administrators, school workers, we're bound by law to keep it private. So there's, I don't want you getting the wrong idea that this is just like a website that people are going to be able to Google and find out all about you. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's basically a way for me to communicate with you and for you to communicate with me, and for us to get rid of some of the paper trails and external emails and phone calls and report cards and things like that we've done in the past. So theoretically, it should be more secure because we're just using one spot. You should know that EDSB, the companies that made EDSB, this is a big global thing. This is not just a local small scale operation. So I don't know that you could ever say that anything in the digital landscape is 100% impervious to being hacked or breached in some way. I don't think any company could ever say that. But it's robust. It's got lots and millions and millions and millions of users, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm suspecting millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in technology and programming and security experts and things like that. So this is a big web presence. It's not a small scale operation, and the school board, the province would not put your privacy at risk by not doing their homework on the security end of things. So ideally, it should be even more secure than things were before, because emails are all going to be the messaging is going to be internal. You can't drop your report card accidentally and somebody else picks it up and finds out your name and your marks and things like that. So theoretically, it should be even more secure. And you will have access to your information. Your parents and guardians will have access to similar information, and teachers will have the ability to give you feedback on your work, for you to hand things in, for you to build a schedule, or for teachers to build a schedule of due dates and things like that. So it's designed to help, right? It's designed to open up communication and make it easier for everybody to communicate and for you to express your learning, and thus, well, continue to learn. I think that's the whole point, isn't it? And ultimately get your credits, get through high school, and get to the next level, whatever you choose to do with your life. All right, there is an app, and I've used it a couple times. You can't do everything in the app that you can do on the EDSB website, but it's pretty darn good, actually. It's better than I thought it would be. So you got an iPhone or an Android, and that's the way that you kind of like to communicate and stay in touch with people and with the world in general. You can download it for free. It's all free. You have an account. You just log in using your student login, and all that information, by the way, is in this announcement. That's in the announcement section. I believe I also sent an email out about it as well. So you can download the app and just have it on your phone, and look at it when you feel like looking at it. Or if you don't want to have it on your phone, it's just a website. You can just go to the website just like you would Blackboard and log in and see all those things that I just talked about. I will say that as online students, you are in a different kind of group. This is going to look a little differently for you than it does for in-class learners. And the reason is that we're already learning online. So we've already been using a learning system in Blackboard, and we will continue to use Blackboard. We're not just shifting overnight to EDSB, because there's a lot of things that we can do and that you can do in Blackboard that are really beneficial for online teaching. So we're going to be continuing to use Blackboard for the foreseeable future, probably even next year and beyond. But I don't know how many students online learners make up for the entire province. It's maybe 10% or something like that. So the vast majority of students who go to have our part-time or full-time students at a physical school will certainly see this as kind of a new thing, because they're not used to all the things you can do with online learning, whereas you online learners have had experience with a learning system, and you're probably a bit more in touch with the idea of downloading the assignment, completing it on your computer, and then uploading your assignment on the website. I think that's easy for everybody in online learning. You've been doing it, but that might be something that's kind of new to a grade 9 or 10 student that hasn't done online learning. So I'd say you're kind of slightly you'd be ahead of the curve. You'd know more than sort of the average student about how things are done in a digital environment and how learning looks in a digital environment. Now, this is not to be then seen as now the physical schools are going online learning. That's not what it is. It's in the background. It's here's how another tool that we can use to get information, to give information, to communicate. But it's not going to change all that significantly. I think the in-class interactions between teachers and students, that'll be dependent on every teacher and group of students individually, but it's just another tool. It's basically replacing Maplewood, and it should give you more information and better opportunities to communicate with your teachers and with parents and whatnot. And that's the goal of it. Okay, I think I've probably gone on enough about EDSB. Check it out. If you haven't checked it out, please do check it out. Just give it a little 5-minute test drive and see what it's got and see what it can do. The official parent rollout hasn't happened yet. So if your parents are going, well, I haven't heard about this, well, that's probably because they haven't rolled it out for parents yet. It'll be rolled out for parents this month, I believe. We just want to make sure it was working fine with students first. So you probably will get your parents, and you probably will get like a paper or physical or mailed report card this quarter. But I'm not sure if it's going to be that way for quarter 2, 3, and 4. So we'll see. If you got any questions about EDSB, by all means, just shoot me an email, and I'll get on that for you. So that was kind of a housekeeping thing. Next housekeeping thing is outcome completion. I have done my best to keep current with the marking. I spent the last couple weeks really doing my best to get stuff back to you, and I do still have a couple things outstanding in my grade book, and probably some students have handed in a few more things today even that I haven't had a chance to get to, but I will continue to assess the work. I will continue to try to give you feedback, and I will continue to offer you the opportunity for anything that's not a quiz to take my feedback and to improve or refine or somehow add to your work or your piece of learning and resubmit it. I'm always happy to give to look at something again and notice that you've made improvements, which means you've advanced your learning, which means you've done what you're supposed to do as a lifelong learner. Why shouldn't you get credit for it, right? Now, you might get a little less feedback on the resubmissions because you've already gotten feedback, but let's just say I've never ever actually given somebody a mark lower than what they got the first time when they've done a resubmission. It's usually students who are taking the concept seriously and they have actually made an effort to advance their learning a little bit, or add a little bit here and there if there wasn't enough detail, or rephrase something that wasn't unclear, students almost always hand in better work if they've actually taken the time to read the feedback and gone to the effort of adding a little bit. And I'm always happy to look at that and say, hey, that's awesome, that's progress, that's how we learn, right? It's not supposed to be punitive. It's not supposed to be you got a bad mark and you should feel bad about yourself. It's supposed to be, you know, maybe you didn't understand this as well as you need to because you didn't consider this, or you didn't read this section, or you didn't watch this video, or you read the question incorrectly, or you got off to a bad start on a question. You kind of just kept going further and further away from the point. It's not supposed to be punitive. It's supposed to be giving you feedback on those things so that you can do your best to correct them. So, you know, I think hopefully most of your teachers are giving you that opportunity. It's not feasible to remark everything 3 times. It's too much time for you and it's too much time for teachers. But in general, I certainly like to see you know, second drafts of things and give you credit for what you've done because you worked hard on it. And that being said, I will also say that some of the writing that I have received in this class, we've done several, you know, semi-formal essays. They might not be full 10-page papers or anything like that, but you know, 3-4-page papers, properly formatted and formal writing, you know, third-person perspective, backed up by evidence, citing your sources, both in the text itself and in your works cited pages. You know, I've read some very, you know, some more formal documents and some very, very well-written assignments. Some of you are wonderful writers, concise, clear. You back up your points with logic, reason, evidence from class materials and external sources. Some of you are just fantastic writers. I've seen some university level stuff from this class, and I've tried to let you know that, those of you who have handed in assignments that have kind of really impressed me. Hopefully I've expressed that to you in the comments section. And then some people are you know, struggling a bit more to express themselves, but hopefully getting a little better every time, because that's what it's all about. It's not necessarily about being the best at something. It's about setting a goal that's reasonable given where you start and improving upon it. And if you're constantly improving, you're doing the right thing, right? If you're putting in effort and you're getting better, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're getting better at playing football or dancing or you know, expressing yourself in written work. Okay, if you are getting better at it, you're moving in the right direction. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, so everybody's different. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has things they work very hard on in life and things that they maybe haven't worked as hard on. That's the nature of humanity. That's the nature of society. So those of you who are wonderful writers, it's not that you were born wonderful writers. You've worked very hard at it. You've probably done a lot of reading in your life. You've probably done a lot of writing and a lot of revision and a lot of checking over and a lot of learning new words and learning how to use words in context. It didn't come overnight. You weren't born with it. You worked hard for it, and that's great. And some of you are you know, maybe you are newer to the language, or there wasn't as much of a focus on writing earlier in your school career. Perhaps there's learning disabilities or different learning styles that come into play as well. It doesn't mean that you've done poorly. It just means that where you're starting from might be a little different than someone else. And as long as you're setting a reasonable goal that you're going to have to work toward, and you put in that work and you improve, you're doing what you should be doing. And don't think that you are, never think that you're any less than somebody else who is, say, a good writer or gets a good mark in the class, because there are things that you do and do extremely well that another person would struggle with and be terrible at. Okay, we all have strengths. They're just in different areas. So always keep that in mind. I think that's just an important part of trying to remain positive when sometimes you get rough news. Okay, not everybody can be good at everything at all the time. you gotta work with what you got, and you gotta just keep working to improve. And that's an important message. Why am I saying all this? Well, marks, you know, we're getting to the point of the semester or the point of the quarter where marks are due. And, you know, some of you are going to get credits and some of you are not going to get credits. But I always try to give my students the best opportunity that I can give them in order for them to express their learning, to demonstrate that they've learned and that they understand what they need to in order to move on to the next level and earn a credit. If if your mark was under 50%, I've likely either tried to call home and or sent several emails asking for work. I believe I sent out a list of the most important assignments in the course. So, these would be the assignments that are kind of the big assignment in every unit, and tried to encourage you to focus. Maybe if you're missing 10 assignments, maybe you focus on 5 that are more important than the others to try to get those in to earn a credit. And I want I want to continue to encourage that for the last 2.5, 3 days of class here, and get me everything you can get me by noon on Friday. I do need some time to assess all of the work that I'm getting in. As you can imagine, your teachers are getting a lot of work in this last couple of days because teachers included, like to procrastinate. So we tend to get a whole lot of assignments at the end of the semester that we got to mark very quickly. And anything that you can do to get your stuff in as early as possible is going to help everybody out. So I'd like to be able to spend Friday afternoon and then my weekend assessing everything and making sure that you've got an accurate final mark, and that I've got a comment for you for your report card, and that we know in the office whether or not a credit has been granted for you in the class. If you have not received an email from me with a big list of assignments and a recommendation, it probably means your mark was above 50%. And as long as you kind of carry on and finish the last couple of assignments, you're not in any danger of not getting the credit in the course. But there are a lot of students whose marks are below 50% that I think can earn a credit, but I can't just award a credit to a student without evidence that they've earned it. It's as simple as that. It doesn't really matter how intelligent I think you are, or how clear I think you can communicate, or how effectively I think you can make points and back them up. What matters is have you given me some indication that you can do these things? And by submitting assignments is how that happens in this course. So get what you can get to me. If you have a choice between doing a bunch of assignments poorly and a couple of assignments well, always try to do a couple of assignments well. All right. I'd rather have 2 assignments with high quality work than 5 assignments that were just thrown together and aren't worth a damn. And I think most of your teachers would tell you the same thing. So do try to hand in quality assignments. I understand that some of you may be under a fair amount of pressure in more than one class at the end of the semester, and I'm sorry about that, but it is kind of the way it works. So if you have a mark 50% or above, you will get the final grade that you get, and you will earn a credit, and that will be fine. You should have some idea as to what your final grade is going to be if you've been checking out the My Grade section. I've been trying to keep that as up to date as I can, and the current mark I always note is approximate, but it should be pretty close at this point, as long as I've marked everything that you've submitted. And like I say, I'm pretty close. I think there might be 5 things left. I have to, 5 actual assignments I have to mark, not many. So most of you should have everything that you've handed in marked already and back to you with feedback. So you should have a pretty good idea as to what your grade is. It's probably pretty close in Blackboard and in EDSB. When in doubt, whatever you see on Blackboard is probably the most up-to-date and accurate. I'm still kind of trying to get EDSB and Blackboard to jive exactly with regard to the mark book. So if they're a little different, your marks are a little different in EDSB and Blackboard, go with the one that's on Blackboard. It's probably the most accurate. So that will be, so you should have a pretty good idea what your mark is and what it will end up being. And again, if you wanted to hand in anything at the last minute or some revisions that to boost a mark from another assignment, yeah, go ahead. I'm certainly willing to have a look at it. And yeah, so that takes care of people who are passing the class right now. For those of you who are under 50% right now, if you can get to 30% as a final mark for the end of the class, most of you are in grade 11, so you probably are aware that there is something called outcome completion. And what outcome completion is it's at the teacher's discretion, which means your teachers get to decide whether or not you should be given the opportunity to have 2 more weeks in order to demonstrate your learning in a few key areas in order to get you to a 50% and earn a credit for the class. If you take up the opportunity of outcome completion, it gives you that 2-week extension into quarter 2. But remember, you're still going to have your quarter 2 classes that you have to get a good start on. So the worry generally is, at least from a teacher's point of view, is that you are going to take the 2 weeks to try to finish up an old course and then get 2 weeks behind on the new course. That's something I think you need to be very aware of. If you are going to take the opportunity to try to earn a credit with outcome completion, you need to make sure that you don't ruin your opportunity to get off to a good start in another class. All right? Ideally, you can find time to do both. You can find time to get the things done for the original class that you need to get done to earn a 50% and a credit, while still getting off to a good start in your new classes for quarter two. Because I think the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you don't go to or do the work for your new classes. You do enough to get the credit in the quarter one class, but then you basically put yourself in a really bad situation where you could potentially be failing 2 new courses because you tried to pass one earlier class, and nobody wants that, right? We want to try to give you the opportunity to do your best work, but we certainly don't want it to be at the expense of something new. So if you are going to take me up on credit recovery options, be willing to put the extra effort in, time in, and make sure that you stay current with the new classes, because we're in quarters here. We're not in semesters, we're not in full year classes. You know how the calendar can slip away pretty darn quickly in a quarter class. So that's what I'll say about that. And I just want to reiterate, you only have this option if I've offered it to you, because I do have the discretion to not offer it if I believe that you're too deficient in your understanding to reasonably go to the next level. So it is at the teacher's discretion. You need to know that. B, it is only offered to students whose mark is between 30% and 49% at the end of the year. So after I've marked everything, your mark is in the range of 30 to 49%. You could be eligible, and more likely than not, I would say, hey, listen, your mark's 33%. If you do these assignments well, you can get yourself to a 50. You've earned the credit. I don't typically refuse students the opportunity for outcome completion. I've never had reason to. I'm just saying it is a possibility. Extremely unlikely. If your mark is between 30 and 50, you will have the opportunity to do outcome completion and that extra 2 weeks. Okay, that 2 weeks is a hard date, though. It's not even our decision. It comes from the Ministry of Education in Saskatchewan. So you only have those 2 weeks. You would not get another extension. The highest mark you can get if you do outcome completion is 50%. Okay, so you can't get an extra 2 weeks to turn a 76 into a 96. It's strictly to get a student's mark to 50% to earn a credit for the class and be able to move on to the next level. So just those are the things to be aware of with regard to outcome completion. If you finish the class and your mark is 18%, I'm sorry, I can't do anything for you. You didn't get close enough to convince the school division that an extra 2 weeks would allow you the opportunity to demonstrate enough learning to pass the course. So that's why it's between 30 and 50. The idea is you just may be deficient in 1 or 2 outcome areas that, a couple more pieces of evidence will kind of push you over the edge. But when your mark's below 30%, it's generally deemed that you should retake the course over again. If you finish the course and you are dissatisfied with your mark, you always have the option to retake a class. And when you retake a class, you might want to confirm this with a school counselor, but if you retake a class to get a better mark, say you're thinking about getting into university and you need a certain mark in a certain class, whatever, English or math or whatever. If you retake a class, I believe that they always leave the highest mark there. So I don't think there's a whole lot of risk if you took, Foundations Pre-Calculus 30 and you actually got a lower mark the second time. I think the higher mark would still be there 99 times out of 100 if a student retakes a class and sticks with the class the entire semester. They get a better mark anyway. That was the whole point of retaking a class. So if you finish this class with a 76, that's the mark you get. And if it's not enough, then you should talk to the school counselor and retake it. I don't know that happens very often in history classes, but I know it does happen in math and English classes relatively frequently. But just wanted to let you know that as an end of term item. And I think that's pretty much all I've got for you. If you haven't received an email from me with, a list of assignments or some information about outcome completion, your mark's probably above 50%, and it's not information you need. As long as you hand in the last couple of assignments, you'll likely be at a very similar mark to what you have right now, and aren't really in any danger of not earning a credit. So if you didn't receive an email from me, don't panic. You probably weren't supposed to get one. But do go look at the My Grade section. Do go make sure you've handed in all the assignments. Do go make sure that you understand what your mark currently is and what you need to do to meet your goals, whether that's to get 100 or 75 or 50. Make sure that you know where you are. Are there any questions on that? Housekeeping stuff. All right, not seeing any questions. We're at the end. We're at modern global issues, and I talked for about 30 minutes on the housekeeping stuff, as usual, probably longer than I should have, but that's where we are. And I just wanted to look at Unit 4, last unit. I think the assignments are pretty straightforward. There's nothing that I've noticed in grading the assignments from Unit 3 that has indicated to me that students don't understand the concept. If I could give any feedback, especially about 3.11, I believe is the assignment. Nope, this is it. Sorry, this is dark blue. First off, you need to, for some of you went to 3.2 or 3.1.2 before this one, you need this assignment for a future assignment. So make sure you do this one first, because the assignment that I just want to talk about here is our protests one. This one is where you were given the photo and you're supposed to give a bit of a back story and then explain what kind of power is being used. Well, that kind of power is directly related to what Eric Liu describes in that TED Talk video. So if you haven't watched the TED Talk video, you probably don't know what the 6 basic types of power are. And that was clear that not many, but a couple students were trying to explain these pictures, but hadn't seen that video or hadn't understood what the video was talking about, and thus weren't able to connect the two. So for those of you who maybe didn't get the mark they wanted on this assignment and are going to refine it and resubmit it, these are the things you need to focus on. A brief description of what's going on in the picture. Okay, you can't just say there's 2 people holding their hands up with a fist. That's not really what's happening in the picture. That's the literal, that's what I see in front of me translation. What's really happening in the picture is that this is the Olympic Games. 2 African American athletes from the US on the podium are making a political stand, and by raising their fist in the air with the glove, they are basically saying, we support Black Power, which is an empowerment movement for people of color, okay, African Americans in the US during the 60s, during the during the civil rights era that we discussed. This is a display, a protest, and a call to action for not just African American people, but all people to end discrimination. Okay, now that's a paragraph of writing. You didn't need that much, but you needed to somehow indicate that this was a protest at the Olympic Games by African Americans trying to support, equal rights for Black people or people of color or all people in the United States. That would have been enough. Okay, but give me some indication that you understand the context of what's happening in this picture. Okay, 2 or 3 lines, maybe even 2 lines is enough. Okay, now what kind of power can you identify in this photo, and then what kind of power are they fighting against? So both sides, right? What are these 2 young men, what kind of power are they showing, or what kind of power are they trying to show? In this case, you could argue that it's the power of ideas, right? They're trying to get across the idea that equality is important. You could also say it's connected to social norms, right? They're trying to change social norms such that old held racist beliefs of that people of color are somehow less valuable or less human. That could be a social norm power. You could also say the power of numbers. They're doing this on a global stage in front of millions and millions of people on TV. That is the kind of power that you can influence a whole bunch of people and get numbers on your side. So it's not that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. There's many right answers as long as you can justify it. What kind of power are they fighting against? Well, there's lots of answers there too. Okay, now this era and the era and in past, physical violence was often used against Black people in the U.S. Like people were often physically assaulted, killed. They were violently dealt with very violently in a physical sense. So you could say they're fighting against physical force by citizens and governments. You could also say they're fighting against state of action. A lot of states at this time had segregation laws, had segregation rules. Black people couldn't do certain things that white people could do. So there was actually laws, which means state authority was one of the powers that was contributing to inequality. So you could say they're fighting against that. I think I mentioned already social norms, the idea of equality and whatnot. They were fighting against the racist social norms, not the good social norms, or not the side of social norms that believes all people are equal and that everybody should have equal, let's say equitable opportunities to be contributing members of society and to be treated with respect and dignity. That's one type of social norm, but another type of social norm might be people who are racist, who don't believe that. So they could be fighting against social norms, trying to replace them with new and more enlightened social norms. Anyway, the point is there's arguments all over the place as to what they're fighting against, what kind of power is being used against them, and what kind of power they're using to try to change things. So that's what you should be focusing on for the 3 points for each of the pictures. Brief description of what is the context, what's actually happening here. Not visually, but what's the situation in a couple of sentences. What kind of power are they using to change things? What kind of power are they fighting against? Okay, so if you keep that in mind, you should be able to do a pretty good job with that assignment. And most students did, but those of you who are planning on, or haven't had it in yet, or are planning on refining it a bit, that's what you should focus on. So that's what I'd say about that one. Still looking at the presentations for Indigenous movements, and I should have some feedback on that right away. And then we're into new power, new politics, new fears, sort of a global look, starting with called the military-industrial complex. And we discussed technology and the advancement of war and how business became involved. I call it the business of war. How business became so firmly entrenched in war and politics that it changed it changed the nature of warfare forever. Okay, war is big money. War is big money, and there are a lot of people who get very, very rich and are very, very happy when people are scared, because it allows them to make more weaponry and different types of weaponry and more modern and innovative types of weaponry. And yes, those can be used to defend people. Those can be used to defend people who are marginalized and subjugated. But let's be perfectly clear. More often than not, a lot of these weapons are used for the wrong purposes, which means that people are actively profiting off of people being hurt. So yeah, okay, maybe I'm pushing my opinion in there a little bit too much, and I don't want to do that. I always want to make sure that I try to present as balanced an approach as I can. But some things like this, I think there's pretty good evidence that war is profitable for a lot of countries, and that oftentimes in society, I think sometimes people say they want peace, or nations or groups say they want peace, but deeper down they know that that war is probably better for the economy. And I'm not going to point any specific fingers, but I think there is evidence there to back up that point. In any case, I also like to believe that in our goal, in our heart of hearts, people want other people to be healthy and happy and connected, and that our goal in general is to learn from things that have not gone well, learn from conflict, learn from tragedy, and try to make it so that we move forward in a better manner. And sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. That's the nature of humanity. So there's some of that in this content. It should make you just a bit more aware of how nations are now. It's almost like colonizing without the the literal occupation of a country. Okay, countries who have the might and the power to do it will find ways of extracting things from other countries that they need. And sometimes that's through trade, fair trade. Sometimes that's through economic sanctions and economic strategies. Sometimes that's through multinational agreements. Sometimes that's through the threat of military action. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that countries get things from other countries that they want. But it's sort of replaced the colonial era. And one of the videos in there is how the U.S. stole the Middle East. Yeah, it's a very I'd say it's a reasonably one-sided look at it, but it's also a pretty accurate look at it from what what history and evidence shows us. You can never be 100% sure, but most of what I saw in that video largely corresponds with what I've read and learned from other places as well. Is how how the U.S. ended up controlling a very, very valuable resource and contributing to economic progress in the Middle East, but not doing it because because we're a bunch of good guys over here in the West, but doing it because there was benefit for both sides. But as you can see, there was a lot going on politically and in religious sense and socially in Middle Eastern countries that didn't jive with what was going on in the U.S. And that causes conflict, and it always does. Money in politics will cause conflict. And I thought it was a really interesting look at how that all started and how it was the cause, or at least contributed to some of the major events that, well, my generation and your generation are probably going to remember for a long time. I mean, none of you would have been alive. None of you would have been alive on 9/11. But I tell you what, everybody in my age group, I'm 43, everybody in my age group remembers exactly where they were and exactly what they were doing when they found out that planes had hit the towers in New York. It's the JFK assassination of my father's generation. My dad always said that the JFK assassination was the thing that everybody in his age group, he's about 70, everybody in his age group kind of dropped what they were doing and went, oh my God, the president of the United States has been killed. So it's the Kennedy assassination for them. It's probably 9/11 for me. For you guys, it's probably COVID. And hopefully that's, there's nothing else horrible and major that happens. But certainly it sheds some light on how all of this started in the 50s and 60s, but ultimately ended up leading to like literal wars and huge terrorist consequences and political instability, and just all of these effects from what happened and the exploration of a resource, and originally something that was intended to kind of help both parties, eventually led to a lot of very newsworthy world events. But he goes a little bit too much into the casual talk for me sometimes. It got a little bit old after a while. Like, dude, like Iraq, still this, and like a little bit too much of that. But I get it. He's trying to kind of make it seem, bringing it into the popular lexicon, make it not quite so dry and dusty old textbook kind of thing. He wants it to be fast and quick paced and have nice visuals, and explain it to to the common people like you and me, what was actually happening without you having to read through a whole bunch of government documents and dry, dusty old material. So I do appreciate that much. Is that it was quite a simplistic approach that still gave you everything you needed to know about that whole oil crisis, and I do appreciate it for that, and that's that's why it's in there. I think it's a good video. But yes, I too believe that maybe I went a little too far down the road with the way it was presented with the talk. I don't even know how to say it. The colloquialisms. I often get tongue-tied, you know this. So into 4.2.1 time flies. I actually really enjoyed these. Now, I probably enjoyed them more than you will, to be honest with you, because I was born in 1978, which means I was a kid in the 80s, but I was like a teen in the 90s. And that, as you well know, tends to be a very, very important decade or time of your life. So I did a lot of young adult maturing in the 90s. It was sort of the height of where I would have appreciated what's going on in the world. I don't think I gave a damn what went on in the world when I was 8 years old. But when I was 14 or 15, you know, you had your finger on the pulse of music and media, and you had some concept of what was going on in the world. And, you know, for me, the 90s was that decade, right? I didn't have, you know, a deep understanding of the economics and politics behind the Gulf War, but I knew that George Bush was angry at Iraq and that they had sent planes and bombs and that they were trying to get Saddam Hussein, who was the great evil in the Middle East. You know, so I was exposed to enough, and people of my generation were exposed to enough of that in the 90s that you had a pretty good grip on everything. We were far too immature to understand the greater consequences of everything that was going on, but we were aware of it. So it's a lot of this stuff when I watch movies like this or when I watch YouTube videos like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. And to be honest, some of the things that they list in this video were important and were like life-changing, and some things were not. I don't know. Nobody really cared about the N64. At least not in my group. It's all about the PlayStation. Okay, now the 2000s. This is, you know, starting to get closer, but you're still kids, right? So again, this is stuff that I would have recognized and yeah, oh yeah, that was a very important event, or I remember that and that was important and it caused this and it caused that, because these were my sort of getting into the real world, my getting into the real world years. I was just out of university. I was living on my own. You know, I had bills to pay and and job to go to and whatnot. So now you're kind of getting to that point in your life where you're trying to adult and you don't know how to do it, but you're trying to adult. And so you pay a little bit more attention. And now you're a taxpayer, so you care where your tax dollars are going. And now you're in the workplace, so you care about legislation and certain aspects of government. I don't want to pretend that you're 40 years old overnight, because you are not. At least most people are not. I sure was not. But you do a lot of learning, a lot of adulting in your 20 age, call it age 18 to 30. You do a heck of a lot of learning about the way the world works. And so that was kind of my adulting years. Now this is where we're probably starting to get to where you're more in tune than I am. Certainly with regard to popular culture and media and technology and music and entertainment and things like that. Some of you are very interested in political and economic and environmental concerns and know way more about it than I do. And some of you probably don't really care. It's just not important enough to you yet, and that's fine. Like I say, I would have been the same way. If you're talking about the 80s and probably part of the 90s. But this is the start of that period of time where you're really, really taking in a lot of information. And so a lot of these things you're going to remember. You're going to remember very well when you're my age, and you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh, that was an important event. Or I remember that it was a big deal back then. Like when Trump was elected president. I mean, when you're my age, you're going to look back and you go, oh yeah, wow, yeah, Donald Trump was the U.S. president. Yeah, and that's going to be an important thing. Oh, I remember BLM. I remember Black Lives Matter. I remember those protests. Those are going to be things that you're going to look back, because these are your major, learning formative years of young adulthood, and you're growing up. You're growing up, and you're doing well, and you're going to be fine, and the world's going to be fine. But these are things that you're probably starting to become very in tune with, and you look back already 10 years. I think most of you are probably between the ages of 14 and 16. So if you look back within the last 10 years, you've been alive for all of it, and you've been plugged in to media enough to remember and to understand the importance and the significance of a great deal of this stuff in both of these videos. So the next 15 years of your life are going to be very interesting for you, and try to stay reasonably plugged in, because the events of the world affect you, and you affect the events of the world. And don't ever think that you're too small to make a difference, because although statistics may tell you that, well, yeah, one person isn't going to make a difference, You also know that numbers can make a difference, and that numbers are only generated by people who are like-minded and willing to communicate those ideas and find each other. So it's important that you stand up for what you believe in. It's important that you learn about what's going on out there. And it's important that you do your best to shape society in the way that you think it should be shaped. And I am trying to be more optimistic, trying to be optimistic in my older age. And I truly believe that most people want to be happy, and they want to be feel like they're safe and loved and connected. And they want the same thing for other people. So I think the decisions that you're going to make with regard to where you want the world to go and the difference between what it is now and where you want it to be for your generation, I think you're going to make good decisions. I think you're going to make a lot of very well-intentioned decisions that completely backfire on you, because that's the way the world works, and it happens to every generation and every person, no matter how good your intentions are. But you're going to be okay, and you're going to make decisions that are right for your generation. And let's be honest, every generation that has come before another generation likes to pretend that the world's going into hell in a handbasket. And you can trace this all the way back to Socrates, all right? Every generation is saying, oh, the kids these days, they're loud, and they don't listen, and they don't learn, and they don't respect their elders, and the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Every generation has people that say that. I'm sure I've heard my dad say almost the exact same thing. Oh, you kids don't know how to work nowadays. Yeah, you're so lazy. You think everything's, you think money grows on trees, and you expect nothing. And my dad's not that guy. My dad's actually really enlightened and lovely. But it is sort of a generational thing where every generation seems to think that the generation after them is lazy and disconnected and is somehow going to lead to the ruination of the world. And guess what? Every generation does just fine with it. The world keeps ticking on. There's still problems. Every generation has them. Every generation invents a whole new layer of problems. But also, hopefully, we keep marching the right direction when it comes to addressing some of the things that any good citizen knows is wrong. Hurting other people, holocausts, atrocities, subjugation, and all the bad things that humans can do. I think most reasonable human beings understand that those are bad things and that we should continue to try to be better. And your generation is going to be no different. And you're going to make decisions, and you're going to have politics, and you're going to have economic situations that my generation is going to look at and go, oh my God, what have they gotten into us now? What have they gotten us into now? And you know what? The world will keep ticking over, and someday you'll be that generation that wonders about the kids and if things are going to be okay and what are they doing. And guess what? They'll be fine too. Every generation remakes the world in the image of what they think is going to be best for their people. All right. Well, that's probably good enough today. And I just want to reiterate, I've really enjoyed working with you guys, with you folks. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck finishing up this class and in your quarter 2 classes and anything else that you're into right now. Please do try to hand in whatever you can. I'll do my best to give you credit for it. If you are in that 30 to 50 range or 30 to 49 range, we'll talk about outcome completion. We'll see what that looks like for you, if that's something you're willing to pursue. And if for whatever reason it just didn't work out this semester and you had too much on your plate or things just weren't working out, don't be afraid to retake a class, to try again. Okay, despite what you might think, as long as you logged in a bit and you tried some of this stuff, you learned, and it'll be that much easier next time. So do what you need to do, and let me know what I can do to help you. All right, take care.